Apple has overtaken South Korean technological giant Samsung as the world's top smartphone seller. Apple ended Samsung Electronics' 12-year run as the largest seller of smartphones in the world after commanding a 20% share of the market in 2023. The change in ranking comes after a tough year that saw consumers going slow on smartphone upgrades due to broader macro uncertainty and high inflation. For more on this conversation, we're joined by technology economist Mudiwa Gavaza, who joins us in studio. Mudiwa, thanks for making time for us. How big a deal is this for Apple?
So it's a big deal simply because for a long time Samsung has been the biggest smartphone maker, in the world. Apple had been, the biggest from a revenue point of view and a profit point of view, because you'll know that Apple commands the premium piece of the market, right? So they had been the most profitable, making the most money. But in terms of units sold, it had long been Samsung, because they make products, from a couple of $100 all the way up to 30,000-40,000 rand. So they have much broader appeal than Apple. So for you to see Apple actually taking over on the number of devices that are being sold, it's big news, simply because it also shows that more consumers are leaning, despite what we're talking about, because this issue of consumer pressure and pockets, it's not only a South Africa thing. Around the world, everyone is struggling with consumer pockets. But at the same time, we see something like this, premium devices are selling.
Yeah, so let's look at the numbers, because in 2023, iPhone sold about 234.6 million units versus Samsung's 226.6 million units. Is that margin significant?
If you think about it, right, that margin isn't that significant, because it's roughly 8 or so million, devices that are between them. But like I said, the biggest significance is the fact that Apple is only selling, premium devices. There's a very interesting number, in the market, which says that, on average, an Android phone, around the world, you're looking at roughly $250, which translates locally to, let's call it 4,500 to 5,000 rand. Whereas for Apple devices, they're averaging, 920 or so dollars, which is closer to $18,000. So the average Android device is 3 times less the cost of an iPhone, right? So once again, it's this premium story, to say that Apple and its premium strategy, it really seems to be working out. And somehow, people are affording to pay, those price tags for the devices that are out there.
So people have been complaining that not a lot is changing about the iPhone. There's some lack of creativity. The phones look the same. Do you hear that a lot, or do people appreciate the consistent standard and design?
I think people appreciate the consistent design. Apple doesn't change its design too much. You could probably peg Apple devices into maybe 4 different designs over the last couple of years. For example, way back in the day, Apple works with motifs. And when I say motifs, I mean when you look at a device, you must very easily say that is an iPhone. For a long time, that was, a small, roundish looking phone that had the button at the bottom. And for a long time, they kept, that design motif. And then, the phones got bigger. Then we got that little notch, at the top. I was not a fan of the notch, and I never got any of those phones that had a notch. And it was an easy signifier. If you see a person holding a phone that has that little thing, it's a notch. Now they have this round little pill at the top that they're calling dynamic island, and that's now the new design motif. If you see someone holding a phone and it's got that little black pill at the top, that is an Apple device, that's an iPhone. People like that instant recognizability, and Apple strives for that. But also the other thing is that Apple consumers just want something that works. And if there's anything that I give to Apple, it's just that their devices work. The failure rate is less than your Android devices, and they play nice with a lot more apps than Android
but
devices.
When it gives up on you, it gives up on you.
Yes, it does.
So, I see that the loyalty towards Apple, the consumers rarely ever switch the devices. How creative has Samsung been in their designs? The sales data came just before the latest release of the Samsung's models on Wednesday. Do you have what are your thoughts on the new devices?
So Samsung has always been able to push the boundaries, right? And one of the things I've always appreciated about them is that for a long time, because they always named their phones up to in S's, so S, S2, 3, 4, 5, up to S, I'm going to call it S7 or S8, they were taking lots of risks, you know, crazy designs, big phones, phones with curves, phones with displays on the side. They were doing all types of things. Then they sort of settled S8, 9, 10, relatively, you know, same design. Then from S10, 20, 21, you know, same design. They seem to have settled on, you know, a common design, but they're still taking risks. For example, they've brought back flip phones. They've now got the folding phones. So they are taking huge risks, but they found their formula. What impressed me about Wednesday, I spend a lot of time, I'm a geek, so I watch a lot of these presentations, Apple, Samsung. Usually they say, here's the new phone, here's the screen, specs, RAM, and then they start going through the features. But here, it was an AI presentation, basically. For 90 minutes, roughly, that's how long the event was. I would say half the event was, this is our AI. We just happen to have some new phones that this AI is going to run on. Because usually it's, here's the new phone, and here's all you can do on our new phone. Now it's, here's our new AI, and these are the devices on which the AI is going to run. So I'm just sensing a shift that's happening there in the market.
Well, that's interesting. So this new data maybe was a psychological blow to Samsung, but do you expect the contest to remain tight even this year?
Definitely.
Between the two?
Yeah, I definitely do, because as much as we segment it as an Apple, you know, versus Samsung type of fight, there are other, you know, considerations to make. As much as Apple seems to be winning right now, there's a ground, you know, China, which is the biggest smartphone market in the world, is a place where they've been struggling a little bit, right? And I say struggling because Huawei is still a huge, you know, player. Despite what's going on in the rest of the world, in China, Huawei is still a dominant player. You've got companies like Xiaomi that are presenting huge competition. And recently, Apple did something that we rarely see from them. They actually gave discounts, you know, up to 5% or around $70 for some of their devices, you know, in China over the last month or two. And for a lot of analysts, that points to the fact that they're feeling the pressure, you know, from some of these Chinese players. And when you look at those Chinese players, they are also one of the reasons why Samsung also has been losing some of the ground that it has.
Yeah. Well, thank you for making time for us.